Qasem Soleimani, the karate fighter, the family guy, and the commander. With Arash Azizi, we will demystify the shadow commander and we will dissect his influence on Iran's foreign and domestic policies in this episode of MENA on the Map.
Arash, welcome to MENA on the Map, live from the Now House here in Amman. You have recently released your book, The Shadow Commander, Soleimani, the US, and Iran's Global Ambitions. And you started your research way before the killing of Soleimani. What were you looking for exactly, and what has changed in your research after January 2020?
I was always interested in Soleimani because I'm interested in the relationship of Iran with the Arab world, and in general, I'm interested in internationalism. It's the fact that someone from Iran would be able to build a military force that composed of soldiers from many countries, and how the Islamic Republic and the Iranian regime was able to have this. So I was interested in this general topic, and Soleimani had come to embody this project of. It's an external operations project of the Islamic Republic, and of course, it had also become an important part of Iran's regime legitimacy. Right, it had become very central to it. So that was my general interest, and I was working on it as a journalist before, and I was researching on it for a long time before. Now, what happened subsequent to the assassination of Soleimani was that there was a lot more info on him because a lot of people came and told their memories. And a lot of, there is, when you write a biography, there's something to a life that finishes and you can sort of view the life as a whole. But I think the most important part was that people were willing to talk about some matters that they weren't before. And also there was an abundance of people talking about him. And of course, the question of what will the region now look without him also became dominant and allowed for a lot of discussions about what was his role, so that now that he's not here, we can feel it.
But you think one person alone can have this much of importance, like focusing all your book on this personality? Can this be available in a country that is ruled by a whole system? What is the value of one person?
Well, it's a fascinating question, and you can ask this to most biographers, right? There's always a problem with the biographer when you write a biography, is that are you really emphasizing one person, whereas you should be looking at more structural reasons. I firmly believe that it's human beings who make history. Of course, they do so within their limited structures, but human beings have an important role. Qasem Soleimani was indispensable to the Iranian regime. There was pretty much no one could do what he had done. And the proof for what I'm saying is you can now look at Soleimani's replacement, Ismail Ghani, and he just doesn't have any of the qualities that made Soleimani Soleimani. He doesn't have the charisma, he doesn't have the relationship. Of course, there would be also no Soleimani without the Iranian regime, without the support that an entire society was forced to give to him effectively, because of course the Iranian regime is a dictatorial regime that put all the resources of a country at the service of this project, and Soleimani had access to untold hundreds of millions of dollars that he could spend on his forces as he wanted. He was famous for sending envelopes, sort of bags full of money to anyone he liked at different points. And by anyone he liked, I mean sometimes there would be a Shia militia in Nigeria that a few people had heard of, and so the state gave him the support. But even in this issue of organizing financial resources, his personality mattered. It's not like he just went to a central bank of Iran and picked up the money. He had personal relationship inside the regime, and the celebrity status, thanks to Newsweek and New Yorker and all the sort of international media that gave him the attention, that allowed him to be this larger than life figure. So I do think his personality mattered. Although my book is actually in many ways not a straight out biography. And it's sort of a history of Iran's foreign policy and external operations in the last 40 years. I think we need someone else, a military historian, perhaps later, and there are more documents to write a fuller biography of Soleimani.
Arash, even though you mentioned it's not a biography, but you try to demystify Qasem Soleimani within the Iranian context, within the Iranian political context. But I'm interested, and I think a lot of people are interested, to know about the traits that you discovered about Soleimani that people are not familiar with, as young Soleimani, as the family guy, also as a commander. What were the traits that really interested you?
I'll say a couple of things that are interesting, I think, and might not be known as well. Number one, of course, as a young kid, Soleimani was not religious at all. He was not a serious political activist. Or a non-serious. He was basically not a political activist. I explained in the book how he participated in the revolution in a very low-key way. I mean, he showed up to a couple of the speeches, basically. No, he was a young Iranian guy who was trying to do something with his life. And I think this is an aspect that we miss sometimes. So he comes from my maternal province. My mother is from the same province of Kerman. So I interviewed a lot of people from that province about life, around where he was born in the late 1950s and 60s and 70s, which led sort of to the revolution. And yeah, the story is he was a kid from a very small town, a village really, who wanted a bigger life. And the revolution provided him with an opportunity to pursue a bigger life like that. And as I said, when he first tried to join the militia that would become his home for life, i.e. the IRGC, he was rejected because he didn't look like a revolutionary. He had funny hair and he had a kind of tight t-shirt, and he was a bit of a gym guy, right? He was a, what do you call it, gym rat, if you use the American example. He was really in gym a lot. He did boxing, he did traditional Persian athletes, and he did karate, although he did not have a black belt, as some people later claim. So that's what I would say of him growing up. Of the rest of his life, I would just say one thing. To the end of his life, he was never a serious political thinker or a politician. He was a military guy. He was in love with the military, right? And he was, look, I'm not a military historian, so I can't judge how much the degree to which he was military genius or not. But military was his life. I can tell you that, for example, when he came to Israel, he was obsessed with different drones that the Israeli army had, the way Israeli army did things in society. But if you asked him to give you a lecture on Zionism, he couldn't really. He wasn't that politically interested. And even the books he read, basically, he read sort of popular level stories of the Shia saints and stories of the Iran-Iraq war, of course, which was personal to him because he had taken part in it, but he wasn't a big reader or a big political thinker like some people try to claim. This is not to even denigrate him, but it's just he wasn't. Politics wasn't his thing. Military was.
I'm just curious about one fact. Were you able to get in contact with one of his family members to work on this book?
Yes, so I spoke to a brother of his. Obviously, this is sort of sensitive, but I was able to get a brother, and I spoke to a brother who spoke of them growing up, of sort of leaving their village together for the provincial center of Kerman, and how they spent time with their cousins there. And so through the brother, I got some family stories. They're basically a bunch of kids from a village, Qanat Malek in southern Kerman, who tried to make it bigger in life first by moving to Kerman, which was the provincial center, and then to Tehran and later on where he went. And his brother now is the head of the prison organization in Tehran, by the way. So he's doing well for himself.
Okay, good to know.
I was listening to your answer to Yara regarding the military personality of Soleimani. Yet he influenced, as you mentioned in your book, Iran's foreign policy, and that's pure diplomacy work. Can you tell us about this?
He was a practitioner. So yes, he did influence, and the relationship between policy setting and military is not one that is one-sided, right? It's not like they just give you some things and you go do them. You have conversations, you give military advice, but he took his line and he became who he is. This is a very important part, through absolute loyalty to Ayatollah Khamenei, who is a big political thinker, who did put the political line of the Iranian regime as to what sort of needs to be done. So that's really the story. That Soleimani was a practitioner. He was interested in military affairs, but when it came to the main political lines, understanding his societies, it was Ayatollah Khamenei who gave the line. if you listen to Soleimani's speeches himself, you see that he's not very accurate always, and sort of he has general stuff that are sometimes, when he became more famous, he sort of gave speeches that were not clear, and he basically makes some faux pas, even, you can say.
Yeah.
But yeah, he had an absolute personal loyalty to Khamenei.
Arash, what changed in the structure of the IRGC and Al-Quds Force after the death of Soleimani? How was it influenced, and how also the killing of Soleimani influenced the internal politics in Iran?
Soleimani had come to live a life bigger than the structures, as I said. For example, it's very interesting. On the financial front, I found out that, how did he have access to his millions of dollars? As I said before, he had friends, basically, connections inside the regime, different people, and you don't say no to Soleimani, right? If he comes to you. Fatah, for example, publicly said, Parviz Fatah, head of a sort of foundation in Iran, he said that, Soleimani came to him one day and said, I can't pay my Afghan sort of militias in Syria. Can you give me some money? And then he gave him some money and he paid them. So he had a bigger than life and role, and Khani has not been able to do that. But of course, IRGC goes on. It's important to remember that Khani's deputy was Hijazi, who was also recently died of a suspicious death of a heart attack. So the Quds Force has been really hit bad. And also Iran has much less money now to spend on these things. So these are some of the problems. Now, as for the Iranian politics, this is a very fascinating question. In the book, I revealed for the first time that Qasem Soleimani was planning to run for president in 2021. Now, planning, just like other countries, doesn't mean that he would have done it, but he was definitely thinking about it. That would have been an explosive move that would have changed many things in the regime. As we know, the presidential elections ended up being engineered for a win, not for an IRGC member, but for a leading member of the clerical establishment, Ayatollah Raisi, who is there precisely because he's a yes man. Had Soleimani survived, it would be a very different political scene in Iran because, he had this political weight that he could give one way or the other. Now, because of his loyalty to Ayatollah Khamenei, there's every chance that there would have been much difference. He would have met with Ayatollah Khamenei, which asked Soleimani not to run. He would have not, and he would have met with Ayatollah Raisi, and, everything would have sort of gone by the book. But it is no doubt that killing of Soleimani changes the sort of future of the politics in Iran, because when you have a celebrity like that, when you have a figure like that, at any point he could have come to the political scene and make a difference. And now he can't. So I don't endorse conspiracy theories that said, maybe Iranians wanted him dead or something like that. Of course, I don't endorse conspiracy theories. But it is true that if I was Ayatollah Khamenei, I would not be entirely unhappy that Soleimani is gone.
It would have been interesting if we saw Soleimani and Raisi competing. That would have been an interesting election.
Well, yes, I don't think that would have ever happened.
Coming to my last question, do you think you can return soon to Iran, and what would be the best scenario for you to do so?
Well, that's an excellent question. And it's a very emotional question for me. When I left Iran at 2008, I had no idea that I would be gone for so long. I did not intend to not return to my country. And, over the years, I've always kept it in my main focus. I still write a lot in Persian. I'm in touch with Persian media, and almost my entire family is in Iran. So I definitely will go back. I have no doubt, because this dictatorial regime won't last forever. I have no doubt. Unfortunately, there are generations of Iranians who died without seeing their homeland, or died, my own grandfather passed away without me being able to see him. And this is the story of many of the Iranian dissidents. Now, what's the best scenario? Of course, I'd love to see in Iran and in other countries in the Middle East the end to tyranny and a democratic structure. And in Iran, I am hopeful that this is possible, even though we're not in perhaps the worst shape our country has been in a long time. The fundamental yearning of Iranians for the country, the love that we carry for the country, has remained, and to see it back to a country that does not have to see its interest in destabilizing its neighbors like it does, and to trample on the human rights and to be a dictatorial regime, it's entirely possibility. And as John Lennon said, you may say I'm the dreamer, but I'm not the only one.
Arash, the interview just ended now, but I would like to thank you for joining us and for taking part in MENA on the Map. Also, I would like to invite all our audience to check your book. I'm personally fascinated with this book, and every time I have an opportunity to talk about it, I won't miss it.
That's very kind of you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a true honor. I hope we can visit Tehran together one day.
Yeah, hopefully.
Thank you, Arash, for joining.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you everyone for watching this episode of MENA on the Map, and see you next week.